Content warning. This podcast contains a brief discussion on sensitive topics that may be triggering to some listeners. If you or someone you know is in a situation where domestic violence is happening, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline for free confidential talk and advice at 800-799-7233. If you would like to skip this portion of our podcast, it comes toward the beginning of our history and facts section. Thank you, and now on to the show. Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question,
does this hold up, or did it just ruin my childhood? Spooky.
Ooh, it's our Halloween episode. My name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And today we are talking about Poltergeist.
We are from 1982. Did I scare you with my spooky part of my intro?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to let everybody on a secret. That was ad-lib.
Okay. So, if you haven't been with us before, what we do is we have a non-sponsored snack. We talk about a little bit about that and give a little bit of history and fun facts, and then our review of the snack. Then we dive into a summary of the show, history and fun facts, then our memories, and then our full review and recap. So, I'm very excited for the snack today.
So this week, trying to keep with the Halloween, October spooky theme, and with doing Poltergeist, we chose Boo Berry cereal is our non-sponsored snack.
Yes. Boo Berry cereal is one of Post General Mills monster-themed cereals. It only comes out at Halloween, and it is my favorite.
Do the monster themes only come out at Halloween?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've never noticed. I thought they were just out all the time.
No, they're not out all the time.
Really?
Yeah, to the extent that, like, when I bought this box, which, by the way, you'll notice I got the family size.
This is like Count Chocula, right?
Yeah,
and
so
Frankenberry. Yeah,
so General Mills introduced 5 brands of these cereals. Now there's a 6th one.
Okay.
They started in 1971, but Boo Berry started in 1973, which means that this is its 50th anniversary.
Wow.
So we're celebrating 50 years of Boo Berry cereal.
That means Boo Berry was out 9 years when Poltergeist was made.
Yeah. So we had Count Chocula, Frankenberry, as Steve mentioned. Mm-hmm. Then they were the first two in 1971. Boo Berry came around in 1973, and then they also introduced Fruit Brute. But fruit is spelled F-R-U-T-E.
Okay.
But it was a werewolf.
Oh, interesting.
And then Fruity Yummy Mummy.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And they both were discontinued, except they re-released them a couple of times, like...
on special Halloweens?
I guess
I feel like it's already pretty select.
And this year, a new flavor came out, which is Carmella Creeper. And we learned from the back of the box has a little cartoon featuring kind of older-looking versions of these characters. And they're all playing video games and hanging out in Count Chocula's castle.
Okay.
And they hear something and they think it's haunted. And Boo Berry says, but I'm not the one doing the haunting. Because that was, like, in the commercials, I guess, a standard trope that he would be haunting the two of them.
Because he's a ghost,
I guess. So they go, and it's Carmella Creeper, who's the cousin of Frankenberry, but a zombie. Why not just have it be a zombie friend?
DJ?
Yeah, maybe a DJ.
Which explains why she's staying at the castle, because she doesn't have a place of her own, because she's a DJ.
That's harsh. That's harsh, but accurate. So she is a rockin' DJ. I couldn't get hers, because they didn't have it at the store that I went to, because it's new and it was, like, sold out.
Yeah.
But I tried to get Frankenberry last year, or Boo Berry, either one, and I could not find them. And we ended up doing, I think, candy corn instead.
Well, Boo Berry is a little bit more on the nose for Poltergeist.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons I picked it.
That's a better choice.
Definitely not because it's my favorite cereal in the whole world. I really almost wanted to like fully stock up and just buy like 12 boxes and have one box a month for the whole year.
No.
It's so great. But then it wouldn't be special, Steve. So, yeah, I think that the history of this is kind of interesting, that basically they just wanted a fun thing, Halloween, and came up with these cute little characters. But they have changed the formula a little bit. The Boo Berry cereal and the Frankenberry cereal had an indigestible pigment.
Oh.
That in medical journals has been referred to as Frankenberry stool, which I find hilarious because parents would see their kids and freak out. And it was just because they had been eating a lot of this cereal.
That's kind of gross, yeah.
It's kind of funny to me. A little gross out flavor. And Count Chocula has had, even though it's only seasonal, it's had some commercials during Super Bowls. And they've had other tie-ins to this too, especially with the Boo Berry. They had Betty Crocker, like, fruit roll-ups. Sorry. Released through Betty Crocker, which is part of General Mills. Yeah. They do fruit roll-ups. And they also had cereal bars for a little bit. Redesigned by one of the people who works for Marvel. You can see, like, it's drawn a lot better than a lot of others.
Yep. Yeah, they've updated it.
A lot of the original one is quite flat looking and had like a little red hat and stuff like that. So, what did you think of the cereal?
Well, for those of you who have never had Boo Berry, it is like blueberry flavored cereal pieces that sort of remind me, I guess the closest taste wise I can think of is almost Captain Crunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit.
And then there's also ghost marshmallows in it, blue, pink, and white. So it's kind of a cross between Captain Crunch and Lucky Charms because of the marshmallows.
Yeah, and this is what the original looked like. I don't know how well you can see the cereal, but it used to just be all of these cereals were a circle with a cross through the middle, which I don't like.
Because it was probably the mold or whatever.
Yeah, and just kind of stamped, and they had a weird ghost with a bow tie and a hat. And then they had bat marshmallows at one point, all of that kind of thing. But yeah, so I don't think I've had this for a few years. And I thought that the cereal was going to be more like Trix.
Okay.
But I agree with you that it's more like Captain Crunch. It's a corn-based cereal. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of sweet, but not necessarily blueberry. The blueberry actually comes from the marshmallows, which were very good. Which are like Lucky Charms marshmallows. Like Steve said, they're in the shapes of ghosts, but they're those like hard cereal marshmallows.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and it turns your milk blue instantly, which is fun.
It does, yeah. And it was also... I felt like it was a little different to eat because, like, if I eat Lucky Charms, like, I jam all the marshmallows in the side of my mouth and don't eat those until I'm done with all of the cereal pieces.
Why not leave them in the bowl?
Because that's just not the way you do it.
I can't.
You
don't.
You jam them all.
I just ate a bunch of cereal.
You put them all in the side of your mouth. I didn't have to do that here because, see, with Lucky Charms, that's like eating the marshmallows last is the reward for eating the cereal pieces.
Yeah, because the cereal's kind of dry.
Yeah, but these cereal pieces didn't taste bad. So I was able to eat everything all at once, which was kind of different as well, but that was interesting. I've never had Boo Berry cereal. My family was not big on sugar cereals.
No, neither was mine. That's why this is like a treat.
And I just never ate sugar cereals as an adult either. So, like, we would have like cereal, like, we would have like Life or like
Pops.
No,
Pops were a little sweet.
Life or like a granola cereal, which I liked a lot, or Cheerios, like things of that nature. But we normally didn't have like my mom was not big on buying us like Fruity Pebbles or anything like that. So Boo Berry or Count Chocula would not have really been something we would have been into.
You know what we had in our house a lot that I hated were grape nuts.
I do not care for grape nuts. Yeah, we didn't have that.
Just give me a bowl of gravel. Like, honestly.
It really isn't good. So I guess if I were have to rate this, and what are we going to rate on today?
We can do haunted houses.
Okay, so I would, out of 5 haunted houses, which is, we always rate 5 for the snack and 10 for the movie, show, or cartoon, I would give this probably 3 haunted houses.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a super fan of sugary cereals, but it didn't taste bad, so I'd give it a 3.
Okay. This to me, I'm not a big cereal person either, mostly for the same reason as you said. This is something that I would have sometimes, like at somebody else's house around Halloween time. And I think when I had a babysitter, like the babysitter would give that to us in the morning. Sometimes she would be like, who hadn't had breakfast yet? And I'd be like, blueberry cereal. Me, I have not had breakfast, and I had fully had breakfast already.
You double up just to get the blueberry.
Yeah, it's not surprising that I'm still chubby.
Like the most sugary I ever had was Frosted. Like Frosted Flakes to me was like a treat.
The height of So this is something that like I got once I was like maybe in college, like once I became older, I would get it almost every year. But apparently not, because I've been married to you for 6 years and you've never had it.
I've never had it, no.
It is possible that I just bought myself a smaller box and just...
But as you know also, now as an adult, I'm more into savory things.
Yeah, that's true.
And so even at breakfast, I'd rather have like a bagel and coffee than
So at any rate, this is a 5 for me. I would eat this every day. So...
Yeah! 4 haunted houses.
4 out of 5 haunted houses for our snack. Not bad. And we got to celebrate 50 years of sugary processed cereal. Also, if you're wondering if you're gluten-free like me, it's technically... It doesn't have anything that says that it has gluten. But it doesn't say gluten-free on the box.
Which means they might just make it in the same place.
It could be processed in the same place. So I've got about 15 minutes before I figure out if it's going to affect me. It should be fun for me.
All right. So I might be doing the show solo today.
So Steve, you picked this movie. Give us a brief overview. What's the movie about?
Sure. So the movie Poltergeist is basically about the Freeling family, which is a father, a mom, their 2 daughters and their son, who live in Cuesta Verde, California, which is a gated community. He actually works for the community. He's like a real estate guy that sells these like brand new build houses. It's like an expanding like housing development. And that's what he does. He sells new houses that they're building. And so they've been living here for, I think they said 5 years. They were in the one of the first ones to move into the place. And all of a sudden they start to have like mysterious phenomenon. It starts with a television on like at night after the this is dating it, but after like regular scheduled programming goes off. Back in the old days when that happened before cable, they would play the national anthem and then it would just go to a snow screen, right? Like digital snow. And so what happens here is in the middle of the night a few times when it goes to digital snow, the youngest daughter is like attracted to that and keeps acting like she's hearing voices from it. And so they basically that escalates into other phenomena, things moving, stuff smashing. They end up bringing in specialists to look at it. The daughter goes missing. And so they bring in extra people to help and these specialists to look into it. And then they end up bringing in like a spiritual specialist.
Yeah, like a medium.
Yeah, a medium who helps identify like that these are ghosts haunting the place from another dimension and then helps them to like open a gateway to help get their daughter back and kind of close it. And so that's basically the overall, there's a lot more we're going to talk about in details, but that's the overall summary.
Yeah, so it's a haunted house movie. Yeah,
it's a haunted house ghost movie, yeah.
Yeah. Except that, and we'll talk about this when we get into the recap, that Poltergeist, the way that they define it in the film, is that it attaches to a person, not a house.
Right.
But then it seems like it's attached to the house. So, which is kind of weird. So, right off, I did put a content warning for this show, and we're going to talk about some things up front so that we don't end on a sad note like we did the other day.
True.
So there have been some rumors about like the Poltergeist Curse. and things about like saying that this movie has a curse on it and things like that. And essentially that comes from three things. So the third thing, the least of this, is that someone in Poltergeist 2 passed away right after the movie, but he was an older man and he knew that he had a cancer diagnosis when he did the role.
So he was already ill.
After during the production of the third movie, the girl who plays Carol Ann, Heather O'Rourke, she passed away as well.
Yes.
She had some illnesses and she had a bowel obstruction that was undiagnosed. Mm-hmm. And I believe that there are some shots toward the end that they had to redo with like a double.
They did, yeah. They shot with someone else, and their shots are done from behind.
Right, yeah. From behind. And it kind of is apparent in the movie that she's sick.
Yeah.
From what I can recall, she just looks like her face looks different. I know a child in my own life who, when I was a kid, had a similar illness and had very similar like puffiness and things like that going on. And then the third thing, I went 3, 2, 1. The first person who passed away was Dominique Dunn, who plays Dana.
Yes.
The teenage daughter. Her father is Dominic Dunn, a writer, and she was in a situation where she had an abusive boyfriend. She tried to basically get away from him several times. And as these situations go, sometimes people go back. It's unclear whether she got back together with him to reconcile or whether he was stalking her. At that period of time in the 80s in California, this is also before Selena and before Rebecca Schaefer died from fans.
Right.
But they didn't have laws really against stalking, and the domestic violence laws really weren't what they are today, right? So it's really not clear that she tried to get help, but there wouldn't have been, like, she couldn't have gotten a restraining order because that wasn't a thing.
Right.
And basically he strangled her. It took I don't want to get into too many details, but it took a very long time. There were many witnesses. Many people called the police. It wasn't a situation where nobody called.
Right.
But she was in a coma for a number of days, and then he was charged with first-degree murder. He got a lesser charge of manslaughter, which can only carry up to 6 years. He then got out of parole after 3. So for murder, he got 3 years. Her family was devastated by this. And Dominic Dunn, in particular, for many years, kind of started stalking him and would go and like find the girls he was dating and tell them.
Okay.
At one point, they passed out pamphlets in front of a restaurant where he was working because he was a very well-known like celebrity chef almost, or on his way to being one. And they told people, like they had pamphlets about how this murder had occurred.
Yeah.
And your dinner's being... But basically, the guy changed his name and moved, and Dominic Dunn kind of came to this point of like, my daughter wouldn't want me wasting my life trying to revenge her murder. Like,
right.
I'm never going to get satisfaction on this. But he spent the rest of his life writing books and producing TV shows that tried to hold people accountable for their crimes. So he wrote Another City Not My Own, which kind of focuses on like the O.J. Simpson case. He wrote a book called The Two Mrs. Grenvilles. He wrote a number of the one about the mistress, An Inconvenient Woman.
Okay.
Right? Which was, they were all like thinly veiled, like about people who got away with murder. And then he had a show called like Power and Corruption and Lies or something like that. So, like John Walsh, right? Whose son died, and then he did America's Most Wanted.
Yep.
That they tried to kind of, have something come of it. And I do think that in part because of her case, the laws did start to change because of cases like hers that got a lot of notoriety, and she was a rising star. I mean, she has a smaller part in this movie, but she only worked from like 79 to 82, and she has like, I think 20 or something titles that she was doing. So So that's why the movie is sometimes called Cursed.
Okay.
But
what other facts do you have that aren't?
This is the thing. Okay, so Oliver Robbins, who played Robbie, the other child, has actually done quite well.
Brother to Christopher Robbins from Winnie the Pooh.
I was like, Christopher Robbins. He appeared in Airplane 2, the sequel. He appeared in Twilight Zone. And then he stopped acting after 1986, but returned to show business as a writer and director. And he wrote a movie called Eating L.A. He's done a number of different things. And awesome. He's kind of like in the background of show business now, like, doing production side of things.
Yeah, it's hard to say the whole movie's cursed because the dad's played by Craig T. Nelson.
Right.
Who went on to get the show Coach. Yeah. And then he's been in a number of things since then. I mean, he's had a successful career.
We didn't watch Parenthood, the TV show, but that ran for like 10 years as well.
Oh, yeah, 100% did. As well as, I think of the fact that he had a very successful career, and JoBeth Williams did too, who plays the mom.
Yeah.
Right? So there were people in there that went on to have really success. So it's hard to say that it was just selectively cursed.
Yeah, and it's not like it was Steven Spielberg's last film.
Exactly. Right? Steven Spielberg produced it. He didn't direct it.
To talk about Steven Spielberg, this is always the interesting part to me, how these things are made. So the idea of this came about, Steven Spielberg had done Jaws. Mm-hmm. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Right.
Which I haven't seen in forever. Mm-hmm. But I remember as being kind of slow.
Good movie.
But it's a good movie.
Yep.
And they were both pretty big hits. So basically he had this idea that he wanted to do... He couldn't do a sequel to Close Encounters. Because it ends with Richard Dreyfuss getting on a... Spoiler alert. It ends with Richard Dreyfuss getting on a spaceship.
Right.
You see the aliens for like 30 seconds. It's more about the journey getting there, right? So, you can't do a sequel to that. Mm-hmm. But he wanted to do more like a companion piece.
Right.
So he thought, well, Close Encounters is about aliens who are kind. And what if we had a story of aliens attacking, but it's more about a family reacting to that attack and coming together to like fight this force together and how it psychologically affects them. But part of that story was that there was going to be one alien that was friendly and trying to maybe help the family. And when he took the idea to the person who ended up directing this film.
Tobe Hooper, yep.
Tobe Hooper, thank you. Tobe Hooper had done the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and things like that. And he was like, I don't know that I can do aliens. So Steven Spielberg is so brilliant. He splits the film that he had written, and the friendly alien becomes E.T.
E.T., yep.
And the angry forces fighting the family becomes Poltergeist, and they do Haunted House instead.
And part of it was when he split the film, he hadn't necessarily fallen on Alien Ghost, but he fell on friendly alien versus like abduction. He signed on to E.T., which meant he couldn't direct the other film because he had a contract that said he couldn't direct two films at once. So they brought Tobe Hooper in, and Hooper was like, I'm not on the alien bandwagon. Let's do ghosts.
Yeah, and now here's the interesting thing about Tobe Hooper. That Zelda Rubinstein, who plays the medium...
Yeah, who's creepy.
I can't pronounce the name of the medium.
Tangina Barons.
Okay, I don't feel like we ever get her name, but okay.
I don't think we do.
Maybe in the second one we do. But at any rate, so she does this really long interview that I happen to find on like a website that definitely, it's called Ain't It Cool News, and the interview is from 2007. And she says, there were a lot of rumors at that time about who directed this film because Steven Spielberg was seen like
he was on set a lot.
Now Tobe Hooper claims he did not direct the film. He was a producer. He had a vision for some of the shots because he had written the film, and so he was very hands-on as a producer.
Right.
Zelda Rubinstein says that's a bunch of BS.
Well, she's not the only one. A lot of other people connected to the film said that Steven Spielberg heavily influenced the direction of the film.
Well, here's what she said. I can tell you that Steven directed all 6 days I was there. I only worked 6 days on the film, but Steven was there. Tobe sometimes set up the shots, and Steven made the adjustments. You're not going to hear that from Tobe Hooper. You'll hear it from Zelda, because that was my honest-to-God experience. I'm not a fan of Tobe Hooper.
Wow.
So the interviewer goes, "You're not?" And she goes, "No. He allowed some unacceptable chemical agents into his work. I felt that immediately. I felt that when I first interviewed for the job. Tobe was only partially there." Basically, then she goes on to say he tried to ruin the film. And chemical agents, she doesn't mean that literally.
Right. She means drugs, probably.
Oh, it could. Oh, it could be. I just thought she meant
she said he wasn't all the way there.
I just thought she meant he was toxic.
No, I think she means drugs.
That makes a lot more sense.
But this actually did her a favor. She worked 6 days on this film, and this launched a career for her. She was in Poltergeist sequels, right? Mm-hmm. But also, she has a very... it's not disturbing, but she has a very unique look. She's kind of small. She's an older lady, and she has a very high-pitched, almost young girl voice to her.
Yeah.
And so, because of being in Poltergeist and being a little bit unsettling... she ended up making cameos and showing up in lots of horror and thriller shows after that.
And she basically said in this interview, I read the whole thing, it's like 25 pages long, but I did read it. But she said in that interview that basically she was planning on leaving the business and then had this role come up that she got, and she was surprised she got. And then because, she kind of knew, because Steven Spielberg was already like, a big time director.
Oh yeah,
with a couple of hits under his
especially
belt.
after this, then E.T. also would have hit and come out, and he would have been huge.
Yeah, and a lot of people know, but I'll say for people who don't, Drew Barrymore auditioned for the role of Carol Ann, and didn't get it because Steven Spielberg thought she would be better as Gertie in E.T.
Which she was.
Yeah, which she was amazing at, and that launched her career as well. Yet he didn't write another. He didn't write another movie until AI Artificial Intelligence in 2001.
This is Spielberg?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big jump.
Yeah, I thought so too. That surprised
me. 20 years.
Because he was producing and directing and that kind of thing. Yeah. Carol Ann, who was played by Heather O'Rourke, he discovered her while eating lunch. She was the daughter of people who were in the movie industry, and they were eating lunch like at MGM in the commissary, and he just saw her and was like, "I think that girl would be good for my movie." So,
well, if he already had Drew Barrymore and thought it moved her to E.T., it's a similar look. But, somewhere in an alternate dimension, Drew Barrymore is in Poltergeist.
Yeah, it's like that.
And Eric Stoltz is in Back to the Future. Right?
Eric Stoltz is in Back to the Future. But O'Rourke almost didn't get the part because she kept laughing during her screen test.
Wow.
And then they told her.
She's young.
She's like 4 or 5, right? And then they told her to scream, and she did. But Dominique Dunn was 22 at the time. And here's the thing. JoBeth Williams, who plays her mom, is only 33.
I was going to say, JoBeth Williams is not very old.
No, so there's only 11 years difference between them. Craig T. Nelson was only 15 years older, so he's 37.
Yeah.
And he kind of looks it.
Yeah.
Especially later on in the film where he's supposed to, kind of...
be worn down.
Yeah, be like really worn down. But a lot of the suburban residents, Spielberg lived in Arizona for a bit of time. He wanted to really establish that this was just a normal American family, and have it look like a regular suburb. Right?
Well, it's in a cookie cutter subdivision which sprung up all over in the 80s. Right, that's what was happening at the time. Actually, there's a scene in it where Craig T. Nelson is pitching to a couple, and one of them actually even says all the houses look exactly alike.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, well, you can make modifications."
Yeah.
But the point is they're addressing that.
Yeah, and it is they had like kind of the urban flight, right? That a lot of people left the city centers around this time, around like the 70s and early 80s, and then you did. I mean, I grew up in a division that was
You
built.
did, but I will say,
a couple years before I was born.
even in the South and the West, especially, they had you grew up in I've seen where you grew up, and you've grown up in a subdivision, but there were different types of houses, but they were similar.
Yes.
I grew up at one point in my childhood. I spent time living in one of these brand new subdivisions in the South, and it was almost like this. Every house was the same, except it was one layout or mirrored.
Gotcha.
So either the bedrooms were on one side of the house or the opposite. That was the only option you had.
Yeah.
It was the same exact floor plan for every house.
The division that I lived in was I think that they had maybe 5 or 6 models for the most part. And then my parents tried to make theirs look a little bit different. So they chose like a model with a modification so that it wouldn't look like everybody else's house. Yeah. And then somebody built one across the street that they built backwards with no front door. Which we all thought was odd. But at any rate, and some of the things in the movie came out of his fears. There was a big tree in his front yard that he was kind of creeped out by. He did not love clowns, as many people don't, because they're liars. They're hiding behind that paint, and we don't know what they're thinking behind that paint mask. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. They also have a couple of shots with his hands in there, because there were some things that, in particular, like there's a model head that an actor is supposed to kind of pull apart.
Yes.
And the actor was worried he wouldn't do it right, and they only had like one shot. So
Spielberg's hands are doing it.
Yeah, again.
Which, again, he's not the director.
Right.
You're saying he had not much to do with this. He's the guy in there pulling the makeup apart on film.
Which I think is crazy. If my brother has time, we're going to also be doing Gremlins. And I don't know if that'll come out before or after this. So it might come out before and people are confused. But Gremlins kind of established the PG-13 rating. And this is before Gremlins.
Was this PG?
Yes.
Wow.
So what happened is initially it got an R rating, and Steven Spielberg went to the MPAA and he goes, I don't do R ratings, I do PG movies. And they were like, well, not this time you didn't, buddy, because this is an R-rated film. So I guess they had to take some things out, but a lot of parents complained. And again, Gremlins is kind of what fully established the PG-13, but this is one of the movies that really set it up. And I have to say, as a kid growing up at this period of time, there were 1 or 2 movies that my parents like let me see or took me to that had a PG rating that full on should have been PG-13.
Yeah.
Even something like, if you think like, I don't know if it was after this, but it's surprising to me that Back to the Future is PG, because there's some like sexual assault, drinking, like I know that it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but the sexual stuff especially, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So PG-13, not fully established, but something that this movie kind of propelled along because PG rating, and now my kid has nightmares. Yeah, but Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, both of those had that. And then we'll talk about the box office and reception later on.
Yeah, it's funny too, because one of the things I was going to say is that we mentioned how this was originally, his vision was for this to be Alien, and then he decided to go Ghost, and then they do this haunted Poltergeist movie, right? It's in 82. It's not very long after Amityville Horror in 79. And it's a very similar kind of plot line in some ways, where you have a family being terrorized in a home, and I guess as we go through it after the break, we could talk about a little of the differences, but it's not super different than that. And it had only been 3 years earlier.
Yeah, but it's kind of, these things come in waves, right? Yeah. Like, there were a lot of slasher movies in the 80s as well. And there are, sometimes you'll get, like, what are the 2 volcano movies that came out at the same time?
Joe versus the Volcano?
No.
Oh, you're thinking of
Dante's
Peak and, what was the other one?
Inferno or something like that.
Yeah.
But you, or like, A Bug's Life and
Ants.
Ants, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Or like when zombies were big. Zombie movies
Right.
came out and they were all zombies.
Yeah.
And then vampires were all, right?
Yes.
So I guess that's true. Maybe it's just that I didn't think about that back then, you know?
yeah, that's true. So, as Steve said, we're going to take our break here. There won't really be a break for you, but we're going to finish up our cereal. And when we come back, we'll talk about our memories or lack thereof, and then we'll get into our full review and recap. We're back. Whoa,
Was that your spooky intro?
Yeah, that was my spooky intro. I'm Megan.
And I'm Steve.
Let's get into it. What are your memories about this movie?
Well, I want to start with you. What are your memories? Do you have any childhood memories specific to this?
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay. You seem excited about that.
I am, yeah. Because normally I don't of scary movies, and I saw them as a teenager because my parents wanted me to have a childhood that was not, filled with images of violence. Unfortunately, I had a babysitter who was not really being as watchful as she should have been. And around Halloween time, my parents were at a party. They hired a babysitter, and HBO was free that week.
Mm-hmm.
And the babysitter decided that she was going to watch Poltergeist and let me watch it with her. And I was about 4.
Interesting.
And then I had nightmares for about a year. Which, by the way, how sometimes you remember your nightmares? I remember, I know exactly the spot where I picked up watching the film with her.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part with meat and bugs. And I had nightmares that we had a lamp that looked a little bit like the lamp in the movie that hangs over the kitchen table.
Yes.
And we're suburbanites. We had a kitchen table that looked a lot like theirs.
Yeah.
And I had nightmares that we were all gathered around the kitchen table talking to the lamp where all the ghosts were. And she did not babysit after that.
Did you tell on her? Did you tell your mom?
My parents knew because I woke up screaming with nightmares.
You're a snitch. I don't like that at all.
I woke up screaming with nightmares, and they were like, why is my child having night terrors, and why does she suddenly want to sleep in our bed? And then I think I said that we watched something scary, and if I recall correctly, they called her or her mom and found out exactly what had been watched. I had a different babysitter another time who brought her boyfriend over to do making out after she put my brother and I to bed.
Nice.
I did not tell on her, but our neighbors did.
Oh!
They were like, there were cars going in and out of your place, and we could see teenagers kissing.
Wow, so they didn't even try to hide it.
No.
She was in front of the windows and
stuff.
Yeah,
or outside maybe. Yeah, but at any rate, and then we had people from our church babysit, and that worked out a lot better. And children of friends or whatever.
Right.
I also wonder too, I don't know how old that girl was because I started babysitting for kids when I was 11. So I wonder too if I know one time my friend and I watched Pretty Woman after we put the kids to sleep.
Gotcha.
And we were 14 or 15 and we're not allowed to watch that movie. So I'm wondering now in my head, I'm like, was that girl just 12 or 13 and not allowed to watch Poltergeist and just thought, I'm going to finally get to watch this movie?
It's possible, yeah.
It's very possible, yeah. I'll have to find out from my parents later. So that's my my childhood memory. And I've seen it maybe one time after that, but again, at least not for 20 years. So, yeah. How about you?
Pretty similar, actually. I mean, I didn't have to sneak it with a babysitter, but I watched it on HBO, which would have been when it first came out on HBO. So probably maybe within the year or a year after this, right? So 82 or 83.
Yeah, so you were young
I was
too.
I was probably 6 maybe when I saw it.
But you watch this kind of stuff all the time, so maybe it wouldn't have scared you.
Yeah, well, I recall it being a scary movie, but I mean, because I thought things were scary, but I was kind of desensitized. Not this young, but by the time I was 10 or 11, I had seen every Friday the 13th. I had seen every Nightmare on Elm Street that had been done by that point, right? Halloween, slasher films I had seen like crazy, right? And a lot of scary films too, so this wouldn't have been too much different.
Right.
But I do recall, I do remember some of the scary parts from it, I remember, obviously, you have like the iconic, the little girl on the TV, right, which became like that was part of the poster and the cover, but it also became kind of an iconic piece, as well as the clown attack, which we'll talk about. I do recall it being scary, but the funny thing is I don't know. I felt that it was, my memory of this was that it was real scary. That this is talked about as one of the classic horror films, and I just didn't find it to be that scary now. Yeah. I mean, part of it could be my age. Part of it could be because horror movies have jumped so much.
Yeah, I think you're right. As we get into our full recap.
Yeah, I'm just saying, as far as my memories go, I have not watched it probably in a good 30 years. So there was a lot of pieces to it that I didn't remember. And it wasn't even as much as the horror stuff. It was just kind of the other things that were in there, plot line and dialogue and stuff that I didn't remember from my childhood.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have, right, necessarily. But yeah, so it was something I did see Poltergeist 2 and 3. So I know that I continued to watch the series.
Poltergeist 2, I don't know that I've ever seen. I've seen a piece of Poltergeist 3. What I do remember, and like once you said that the poster of the girl in front of the static TV, is that they had a ton of ads for Poltergeist 2 because Poltergeist 1 had been such a hit. And Poltergeist 1 was, they're here.
Right.
Poltergeist 2, I remember very distinctly, the ad is the child's phone ringing out of nowhere because that's supposed to ring. She picks it up. And then she goes, they're back.
Yeah.
And then hangs up the phone. So I was more creeped out by that than I was this movie. I have to just, not to spoil the whole thing. But, so before we get into our full review and recap, I would say my issue going into this with this movie is that it's like 40%, maybe 30% action and what the heck? And like gross out stuff and scary stuff. And 70% people sitting around talking.
Yeah.
Like there is it starts off, as Steve said, we've got the Star Spangled Banner playing and then static. Because kids back in the day, TV stations would sometimes turn off and they just have static or the symbol.
Yeah, there was the old symbol with like
sign.
It was like an Indian head, a Native American head.
Yeah.
With like a couple call sign things on it.
Do you remember that though? Because I don't.
No, I remember the national anthem, but that would have been. I mean, I would have been a young kid at this time, right?
Right.
I mean, like I said, if I watched this when I was like 6 or 5, I would have been the same age as the little girl in the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, and so I just recall that as well.
I think that around this time that was phasing out, but we certainly did have. I don't even think our TVs at that point would have had a remote. We got one later, although you could have one. We didn't.
Right.
But this had like UHF or VHF.
Yeah, the 2 dials.
The 2 dials, like AM and FM, and then you'd have to like flip around. And I've talked about this before, like we live near Canada, so we got a lot of Canadian stations over the broadcast airwaves.
Right. And theirs is digital. Mm-hmm. And they do have a remote because there's a piece in it later where he's dueling remotes with the neighbor because they both have the same TV.
It's not. I mean, it still would have been antenna,
right?
Because
it's not cable.
No, but they do have that. But at any rate, we have this long sequence where their dog is going from room to room.
Yeah.
Kind of to establish the family.
Yes.
Right, and then Steve goes, "That's our dog," because the dog pulls a bag of chips out of Dana's bed. She's sleeping.
Yeah.
And runs away with it as fast as he can to eat up all the chips.
The dog is basically, and he's scrounging food everywhere he can go through the night. The thing that threw me off about this opening sequence is on the TV. I don't know if you noticed it, right? And this is a detailed thing, but they've got the national anthem playing, and then it goes to static. Mm-hmm. And because it's digital TV, it's got the time, and it says 2:37 to tell you it's the middle of the night, right? But you wouldn't go off the air at a weird time. It would be 3 o'clock or 2:30 or 2 o'clock. And I'm like, that's a weird thing to do.
But Carol Ann comes downstairs. The dad's just passed out by the TV. Like, he's fallen asleep with the TV on.
Yes.
But it looks like he also fell asleep smoking.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't know. right off the bat, I'm like, do they have a horrible marriage? Like, do they have a bad marriage that's going to be tested?
They fell asleep with some kind of drink. Like, I don't think it was like alcohol. I think it was coffee or soda because the dog drinks out of that too as it's scrounging through the house.
Now, we're paying a lot of attention here just to the opening sequence, but I do think it establishes a lot about the timeline. It's trying to show you that this is a normal, like, everyday family,
yes.
3 kids, a dog, a mom who stays home, a dad who we find out later works in real estate, and a carpet that is the color of baby poop. And it's through the whole house.
Well, the master bedroom is like a rose, colored carpet.
Yeah, I don't know. It's this like weird brown carpeting, and it's like not quite shag, but not quite not. But Carol Ann starts talking to the TV and wakes up the entire house. Okay, and then we cut to the next day, and there's nice
and the opening credits.
Music, and the opening credits. The whole family's awake, and there's no follow up. There's no, like, Carol Ann, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah,
there's no, hey, she's sleepwalking again. There's nothing. We all go back to bed, and then the next day. And then we get the long shot again of the bikes, the cars that are almost identical, the houses that are identical, the cul-de-sacs, the dogs. And then one guy, so everybody's driving around with a car, and then there's one guy on a bike with, like, a case of beer that he's holding. And I'm like, oh, that's the guy who was like a drunk driver and got his license taken away.
Yeah. But
he's bringing the beer over to the guys to watch football. So it's just, you guys, I can't stress this enough. This film, before anything really happens, is like 20 minutes long.
It is. It's a long cold open.
We see that, like, Robbie's climbing a tree. We see
the parents do address the night before a little bit.
Yeah, a little
because
bit.
The mom says, I'm afraid she might be a sleepwalker. I was a sleepwalker when I was young. And then she tells a story about how she once sleptwalked like 6 blocks and fell asleep in a neighbor's car, and he didn't realize the next morning until he was to work, and she wakes up and screams, and they have to call the police, and she's like, yeah, it was crazy, and the dad's like, yeah, that's nuts. And I think I turned to you and I go, what I just heard is that she sleptwalked and almost got the neighbor arrested for kidnapping.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he drove a child because he didn't realize she was in the back seat of his car.
And the two of them are smoking pot and laughing about this.
Yes.
And Steve and I are kind of like, well, Did everybody just think he was a pedophile from then on? Like, was he okay? Yeah, it's supposed to be kind of a joking, kind of thing to show to their relationship. But there are these like weird. The kid climbs a tree and he sees like ominous clouds coming in toward him, and then it kind of is raining on and off through the whole rest of the movie.
Yep. While they're burying the dead bird.
Yes. And to which the mom says, oh, you couldn't have died on a school day, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, because Tweety, the bird, passed away, and so she had to bury it. She was going to flush it, and the little girl caught her, and so they had to bury it.
Which also, Steve and I were like, look, I get that this is foreshadowing, right? That death has touched this family, and it took the weakest one first, and then it's going to take the girl later on. But do you flush the bird? Because I feel like...
I think there's certain things you flush, like a goldfish, possibly.
Maybe.
But a bird is a bit big.
Yeah, that's not good.
Birds, cats, dogs, you do not flush. Those are just things you don't know.
No, you don't want to do that.
So it's good, I guess, that the young girl, is it Carol Ann?
Yeah.
I guess it's good that Carol Ann caught Mom and forced her to bury the bird. But the hilarious part is she's distraught about this. They finally bury it, and then she goes, can I get a goldfish? And then it cuts to showing the new goldfish, who she's named Tweety 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Even though it's a goldfish.
And there's also 2 of them in there.
Yeah, she says Tweety 2 and Tweety 3.
Yeah. But it's a weird time jump. And I wrote in my notes, 20 minutes in, and nothing's happening.
Yeah, there's just a lot of... It's just slow groundwork.
Slow as anything. And here's the thing. I feel like this movie was a little over 2 hours long. it easily could have been an hour 30. There is not, you can show the bird dying and maybe that's it. Like, you see all the family members. You don't need this long thing with the remote control of, oh, the neighbor's kids want to watch Mr. Rogers. You want to watch the football game. You're going back and forth with the remote control. You don't need any of that.
Yeah.
Like, and this isn't, sometimes we talk about we like a little bit more exposition, so it's showing instead of telling, but this was just way overkill. Honestly, the shot in the beginning with the credits to show the cul-de-sac, the kids playing outside, the identical cars, the guy bringing that, like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Just even showing the cul-de-sac. Okay, we got the setting. You don't need to establish it for 20 more minutes, you know. Then we have some seizure-inducing lights.
Yeah, because it flips back to the middle of the night with the TV again,
TV people.
and it really does flash quite a bit. If we should have put a warning at the beginning of the episode in case if you're going to watch this on your own, you shouldn't have epilepsy.
Yeah, we really should have. And I skipped over one part, Steve, that I do want to mention, which is that unlike most haunted house movies or stories, usually it's people moving into a house. These people, like you said, they've lived there 5 years.
Yeah.
So the pools are being dug in the neighborhood, and especially at their house. And that seems to maybe stir some stuff up.
Right.
Because otherwise, like, why now? Why at this particular point in time? So all of the men are doing construction, and they've been there, I guess, for a while.
Yeah.
It's taking a while. And I think it seems like they're going through the neighborhood.
Yeah, I believe so.
So the men are there, and they start sexually harassing the teenage daughter.
Yeah,
who we find out later is like 15.
Yeah, right? I think he says 15 or 16.
16, yeah.
And there's a lot of references to her being like promiscuous or kind of trashy a little bit.
Yeah.
Like at one point they say, like near the end of the movie, they say, "Well, we're gonna stay tonight at the Holiday Inn on such and such highway." And she goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that place." And her mom looks at her and she like pretends like she didn't say anything. And I'm like, whoa. And also the way that she's like, it makes it seem like these construction workers who are catcalling her.
Yeah.
Right? And her response is she kind of like flips them off and like, you know, gives them a few different, like flicks her teeth at them. She flips them off. But it's like she's used to this. It's a teenage girl.
And her mom is looking out the window and just chuckles to herself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. No, because these dudes, it's not, I want to be really clear. It's not like she's very established senior in high school and they're like 21. These guys are like 40 and 50 years old. Yeah. Hey, look at that. She's just wearing shorts. It's not like she came out in like a busty.
Yeah, a bunch of construction workers do that to my daughter. I bury them in the pool.
Yeah.
I'll be like, I don't know what happened to that crew. They probably ran off with your money.
And now we have even more skeletons than before. Yeah. But at any rate, the next day or a couple days later, there's a storm. Carol Ann and Robbie go in their parents' room. They fall asleep. The TV is left on again.
Their electric bill must have been super high.
I know, right? They just leave it on all night. So the static comes on, and Carol Ann starts talking to her TV friends. You can kind of hear them going, "Oh, the light! Look at the light! Help us find the light!" Like that, over or underneath rather the static, and then. Okay, what comes out of the TV, Steve?
You're like a smoky hand.
But it's very clearly a cartoon.
Yeah, it's obviously like an overdubbed animation, sort of.
And here's the deal. We watched Superman a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Superman was done in 1978.
Yeah.
There's no need for effects like this, Steven Spielberg. I know you have the money. You have Jaws Bank. You're producing this. Like, I don't understand what, like, some of the effects in this hold up the practical stuff. Like, the room shaking, things flying around is actually done pretty cool. But there are a couple of times where they have cartoon things.
Yeah,
it's very glaringly.
It's clearly animation. I mean, this is obviously way before CGI, but it was,
But there's no need for that. Like, you could do it with smoke or have it even better animation. Mm-hmm. Like, come on, buddy. At any rate, she says, they're here. And then it cuts to the construction of the pool and digging up Tweety's coffin, which, by the way, the dog already tried to do.
Yeah, the dog tried to dig the bird up the second they buried it.
So heavy foreshadowing, right? And we have a couple of times, again, the lights come on above the table and the TV in the breakfast nook comes on.
Yep.
And
the chairs begin moving in the dining room.
And this was a really cool detail. Robbie, who, by the way, we find out sleeps with his baseball cap on.
Yeah.
What?
That's so you know he's an all-American boy.
Oh, that's true. That's true. He should have had the Cub Scout.
Yeah, he also has Star Wars sheets.
Yeah.
Which I got to be honest, were cool.
They were pretty cool.
Yeah. I wish I had some.
But Robbie goes to eat his cereal and he breaks his glass all over his sister Dana.
Yeah.
But he holds up his spoon and his fork and they're like twisted. And there was this guy at the time, Uri Geller, who claimed to be a psychic who could bend spoons. So I think it's like kind of a note to that.
Okay.
And he obviously was a fake.
Right, right.
But I just thought that was kind of a cool detail. And the chairs moving, the way that they do that is pretty cool too. Because first they're out.
Yes, and then they're stacked.
Yeah.
Then Dad comes home, and Mom has realized that if you put a chair in this one spot, it'll move to the other side of the dining room kitchen, right? And she's marked on the floor, like, where it goes.
Yeah.
And she goes, watch this. And she puts it there, and then they wait, and it starts to wobble, and then it slides like 15 feet,
yeah,
right, to the other spot and stops. Then she goes, now that's cool, but watch this. And she puts a football helmet on the 5-year-old girl,
that's what I was gonna say.
Sits her on the spot, and she gets slit in the ghost slider across the room.
It's so unsafe, but also she's like manic and giddy about it.
That's what was weird.
It's very strange.
I would be freaked. I'd be like, yep, we're done.
Listen,
if stuff starts sliding predictably across I would be like, we're out of here. And she tells him, you want to try? And she's done it because she says you can feel like a pulling, and it slides you across.
It's like a little tickle in your tummy.
Yeah. And
then it gets stronger, and then it pulls you.
I don't know if they were trying to make it look like this was affecting their psyche, too. But it seemed like they were very nonchalant about this.
Well, I think this is after Exorcist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I was getting from this. Like The Exorcist, where you're playing around with a Ouija board and then all of a sudden shit gets real. It invites
things in, yes.
I think that's what this was trying to show. But my question was she still smoking pot? Like, it was a very odd reaction. It could be affecting their psyche because he's scared out of his mind.
Yeah, he's like, this is weird. No, I don't want to do that.
Steve, if I was home by myself and I'm playing with the dog and I turn around and all the chairs are stacked, I'm saying some Bible verses as I'm getting the dog out the house.
Yeah.
And the only thing I'm taking are my keys and the dog, and we can hire movers to pack up the rest. And some of it might have to get burned.
Yeah,
including the table
we're
and the
burning
chairs.
it with fire.
We're burning it with fire, and we are selling the property and moving.
We're salting the earth.
That's it.
Holy water.
Yeah, holy water and salting the earth is a big thing for me. I would do the heck out of that. So I would not be laughing hysterically. Then the two of them go over to the neighbor's house, giggling like morons, and they're like, "Have you noticed any disturbances?" And the guy's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he's made to look ignorant, but let me tell you, he's not. And also the mosquitoes are biting them like crazy.
Yeah.
And he and his son are like, there are no mosquitoes. Like, we're not being... So it's very clear that this, whatever this is attached to their family.
Right.
And it's like Lord of the Flies, I think, with the mosquito thing. But yeah, the reaction there was so strange. So the tree is the next piece. Because the tree in the storm breaks, but then it comes alive and it grabs Robbie.
And it comes through the window after, looking like it's coming after Robbie.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame Robbie. It's a creepy looking tree.
Well, it's a very fake looking tree.
It's a very old tree, and it's supposed to be made to look very old, right?
I know, but...
And the dad's like, it's been here for hundreds of years, even before we were. He's like, well, you know, and I like that tree. He's like, that's why we built the house here. Wait a second, Craig T. Nelson. You got to choose where the house was built, and you had it built 3 feet from a tree?
And how
are you an
that,
idiot?
A dead tree that's taller than your house.
Yeah, that's going to fall on your house.
Steve goes, Megan, if you had that tree, would you have been creeped out by it as a kid? And I said, I would have been afraid that there would be a storm and it would break and fall on my house. It's an enormous tree.
Yeah. And it comes through the window in the kids' room, right?
Yeah.
So he has the opportunity to have the house built, and he's like, build it 3 feet from that huge old tree that's going to break. And he's like, you know what? Align it next to the kids' room.
Also, we need to pause to say, I realize that Robbie is 8 and Carol Ann is 5. But they're sharing a bedroom still.
Yeah, brother and sister.
And I get like Dana is 16 and probably wouldn't like Carol Ann there, but at this point, like, he's 8. I just feel like that's too old to have your sister in your room. Like, put her in with, if you don't have the space, put her in with Dana and have Dana deal with it.
Right.
You know, but and that's just it's just these are the out because this movie's so freaking slow.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden a tree breaks in. Like, so we found some action. Everybody's screaming. Robbie is basically meant to be a distraction, although the tree is about to eat him.
Right, because it pulls him out of the window.
But Carol
into the storm, and it starts to jam. He starts to jam poor Robbie into this like mouth in the tree.
Yeah, and he's like traumatized. But then Carol Ann is pulled into her closet, and this effect they did really well. The light in the closet where we can't really see much is through most of the movie, and it's kind of cool. It's like the box in Pulp Fiction,
yes,
where they open up the box and it just glows. It lets your imagination fill in the gap, right? But she's holding on to her headboard and she's pulled in. And then the whole family, Robbie's saved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's the boy.
I'm sorry.
You know?
But he is very traumatized. He has blood and mud all over him. Okay. He's like shaking. And they all like, screw you, Robbie. And they all start looking for Carol Ann.
Yeah.
And nobody stays with him. And also, the mom, the older sister, all they were doing is screaming.
Yeah.
Then they at one point think she might be in the swimming pool.
They're having an in-ground pool put in, and they've dug the pool shape and depth in the dirt.
Yeah.
But they haven't put the cement in and the liner, so it's just this pool-shaped hole that has some rainwater.
But now it's been raining.
Right.
The other thing is during this whole sequence, again, the freaking animation. There's a fake cyclone. There's a tornado coming toward them, and you see this twister. It, again, looks super fake, and this is the 80s. They even got a twister to look real in 1937 for
Wizard of Oz.
Like, get your act together. Anyway, that's the chemical stuff that we'll blame that on Tobe.
Yeah.
Tobe directed that part. So they can't find Carol. Oh, also, can we talk about the clown? Because Steve pauses the movie, looks at me, and goes...
First off, because they have like almost a life-size or a child-size clown puppet. With arms, legs, and everything. It's creepy looking. I'm like, why would you, first off, even have a clown puppet that large?
Yeah.
Right? Secondly, why would you sit it in the rocking chair staring at your children in their bed? You're trying to create nightmares? You're trying to traumatize them?
So, here's the deal. I used to collect, and I have someplace in here... some porcelain dolls when I was a kid because I read Little House on the Prairie. I thought they were delicate and beautiful. And I had a small collection, like 4 or 5 of them. I got one like at different points.
Right.
I had a relative who lived far away who didn't really realize like by that point how old I was. I was maybe like 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. And they sent me a Harlequin clown doll.
Yes.
And it one day accidentally fell off my bookshelf. And I put that in air quotes because that thing was creepy. And I didn't feel like I could really get rid of it because I had been given it. But the relative in question, like, I've only seen this person like 3 or 4, you know, and...
It fell accidentally and broke.
Like, kind of like it fell off the truck.
So you threw it away, and then the next day it was back?
No!
fixed on your shelf like nothing had ever happened.
With just a tear on its face. Yeah, because
but not like creepy. A crying tear, like a murderer tear from prison.
Tear. Yeah, the black murderer tear. But this is the thing. This is, like Steve said, this is like the My Buddy and Kid Sister dolls.
Yeah.
But a creepy clown with long arms. And it sits sometimes in the chair. And one time it's in bed with Carol Ann.
Yeah, no.
Like, no, we don't allow that. We don't allow that. I don't like that at all.
If you're trying to comfort your daughter, that's not the way to go.
That's not going to help. So, so at any rate, they go in the closet. They think that Carol Ann is dead under a blanket, I guess.
Or covered under a blanket.
Or covered, and they take the blanket off, and it's the clown.
It's the clown, yeah.
And then Robbie starts screaming because he hears Carol Ann, and then they realize...
Coming through the TV. Yeah.
Her voice is coming through the TV. She's now like one of the TV people. So then it's been a couple of weeks and we have this establishing shot of the local college.
Yes.
Craig T. Nelson has gone into the parapsychology department, which is also where Ghostbusters work.
Right.
And there are a professor and her 2 assistants.
Yep.
And she says, now, are you okay keeping this out of the press? And he says, look, we don't care about the screaming or the music that plays at all hours of the night. We just want our daughter back. He's totally changed by this point. And I really liked how Craig T. Nelson played this. I thought that he did an excellent job in his role. I thought JoBeth Williams was good too.
Yeah.
But I really thought that they did a little bit of makeup on him to make him look haggard. He looked like he'd been drinking. We find out later he's taken a lot of time off of work because of all this, because you can't sleep either, right? And I also liked... I will say in terms of writing, I liked the structure of this in that typically a haunted house, the people are, like I said, they're moving in. And sometimes they don't have anywhere to go because they've just sold everything. They're in debt, whatever. Here, daughter is now part of the house or trapped in the house.
100%.
So I liked that it's not like, oh, all this crazy stuff is happening, but we're going to just stay here because of his job. They really have a compelling reason to stay.
And I said earlier before the break that this some of the plot reminded me of Amityville Horror, right? This is one of the places where it deviates, obviously, right? Amityville Horror, you're like, just leave the house. Yeah. Burn it down, right? Here, you're like, okay, this makes sense. But also, up to this point, too, the other thing that threw me off, and I said, okay, it is different than Amityville Horror, was that weird tone. Mm-hmm. That's kind of sort of casual, and they're not really freaked out by stuff.
Yeah. Well, the real story of Amityville Horror, if you ever read about it, is that these people overspent on this house. They were deeply in debt, and basically they found out it was a murder house, and were like, hey, let's make some money, and did. And that's pretty much how they made their retirement. And they're living. But I really, you're right. The tone shifts, obviously, once the girl is in peril. So then, this was one of my highlight parts as well.
When we've met Dr. Martha, Dr. Ryan, and Dr. Marty.
Yeah, and they come over, and there is, I will say for this type of a movie, an appropriate level of humor to kind of break things up.
Okay. Because
Dr. Ryan says to Craig T. Nelson, Dr. Martha says, the last one it's okay. They're about to enter the Carol Ann's room. Yeah. And he says, Dana's been staying with friends. Robbie sleeps with us now. We don't go in this room. Right. And she looks at him and goes, we had the last phenomena we recorded was a small child's car.
Yeah, matchbox
car that rolled 7 feet across the ground.
Yeah, we're this isn't new to us. Yeah. And the other doctor goes, it went very slowly, so you could barely tell, but I did it on time lapse, so you could see.
He goes, it was almost imperceptible. It lasted 7 hours, but I had a time lapse camera. Yeah. And Craig T. Nelson looks at JoBeth Williams, and they look back at each other, and they look to them, and he goes, uh-huh. and flings the door open, and all of the belongings of the circle
in midair.
And
beds, lamps, toys.
There's a lamp that in front of Dr. Martha's face screws into a light bulb, turns itself on, and then keeps going.
It's not plugged in.
No, it's not plugged in.
It's circling the room.
There's also, I love this detail, and it's so 80s, but there's a protractor, the needle of a protractor playing a record, and both of them are spinning in midair too.
Yeah. It was a tremendous, timing-wise.
Yes,
it was a tremendous comedic reveal.
It really was,
because it's almost like you're building suspense. You're like going upstairs to the room, and then they're like, "Oh, this is old hat for us," and he's like, "Oh, really?" And he opens the door,
and then so they show this thing, and this is part that, again, the special effects were really good here.
Phenomenal.
Especially for the time. So then it cuts to a shaking hand holding a tea.
Yeah, Dr. Martha's downstairs having tea, and they're a little freaked out, excited by this.
In my notes I put shook. Because... And then Dr. Chris, is that the third guy's name?
It's Martha, Marty, and Ryan.
It's Marty. Okay. Ryan's the African-American. Chris is the guy who's he's the younger guy who's like more skeptical. But he goes, this isn't your classic haunting with just some creaking doors. And he keeps trying to find the wires.
Yeah, he's I'm looking for speakers, and they're like, really?
I kind of like that they had one person who was a little more skeptical, who was like, look, there's a lot going on here, but they could be making this up.
Yeah.
Right? We have to kind of investigate this part of it. But she kind of explains that the difference between a poltergeist and a haunting.
Yeah. And so her explanation is that, a poltergeist basically is souls or spirits or ghosts that are attached to like to a person or people, right? Whereas a haunting is attached to a house. So basically you're saying like a haunted house, if you leave the house, no problem. A poltergeist, right? If you leave the house, it could go with you, right? Or it could be connected to certain people.
Right. But the thing is, later on we find out some stuff about this house and the houses around it. And that they were built on a cemetery.
It's really that the land is haunted.
And I remembered, I don't know why, but I think the trope is like ancient Native American burial ground.
Right.
It's not. The caskets pop up and they're like later on.
Yeah, it's not. But it is. It was buried basically. It comes out that they were supposed to. The guy in charge of the company that built these, that's Ted T. Nelson's boss. They basically were supposed to move a cemetery, and they got the sign off and everything. But what they did is they just moved the headstones and left the graves and the caskets and the bodies underground. Yeah.
So the thing is, though, that in this film, if you don't count part 2 and 3, which weren't originally part of the plan,
right,
it is very definitely part of the house. I mean, given we don't want to skip too far to the end, but given the ending, it seems to me like that's a hole, I think, a big plot hole. But at any rate, before the Craig T. Nelson, whose name in this I forget. Steve. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yep, Steve.
Yeah. So Steven's boss comes, but before that, we get kind of like almost a montage of scenes of the investigators.
Yes.
Right? So Marty goes up to investigate Carol Ann's room on his own to check for speakers and stuff. And he gets bit. And he comes down and it's like on his whole side of his ribs.
It's a mouth. It's a bite mark that's like 2 feet wide.
Yeah, he goes, something bit me. And they're like, where? And he lifts up his shirt. That was, again, a cool makeup effect that didn't take a lot, but was really, really cool. The researcher also talks to JoBeth Williams' character, and she says, and I wrote this down too, this is not something you master in. There are no licenses or graduate degrees. What?
For parapsychology.
Yeah. But she goes, this has just been my ghostly, I'm a psychologist, and this has been my ghostly hobby for a long time. So my daughter's gone, and a hobbyist who's has no degree and no license is going to help me. I don't know.
Teach. If you can't teach, be parapsychologist, apparently.
Or teach gym. Either way. And if you can't teach gym, become a school administrator. Joke, but it does happen a lot. Anyway, so and then she says this weird, so they're both drinking and she says it's her hobby, right? And then she says, this is like a human. I feel like a human coming out of the forest primeval and seeing the moon for the first time and throwing rocks at it. What?
We're supposed to understand that she's educated and learned.
Well,
instead, she sounds like an idiot.
It's like Plato's cave, right? Where you're looking at shadows and then you see the real world, but it's supposed to all be poetic, but it doesn't fit with any. No. We're just like, I don't know, you're very drunk. Go back home for a bit. I don't know.
Part of the montage also is we have Marty, Dr. Marty, I think, right? Mm-hmm. Who is the one that's skeptical.
Yes.
And got bit. And he goes to the kitchen and starts eating food.
And that's where I started watching. That's where you start watching.
And then the food, like the steak is moving across the counter and then starts to like explode.
Yeah.
And then the chicken he's eating has maggots on it. And he kind of starts, so he goes into like a washroom to wash his face. And that's when we have that scene you talked about with Steven Spielberg's hands, where he looks in the mirror and he sees like the flesh ripping off his face. And then, of course, he like looks down, looks back up, and it's not. It's like a hallucination. But the funny part is the next morning they're like, "Okay, we're coming back. We're gonna get phone like another specialist I know." Mm-hmm. She's like, "And me and Ryan will be back. Dr. Marty will not be returned."
Yeah. And she's like, "What?" And she goes, "I'll be back. It's okay."
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Steve. I want you to close your eyes and imagine for a moment, okay? Little Megan is so innocent. She has only read library books about sunshines and rainbows.
Watched Strawberry Shortcake.
The only thing I've watched really, Strawberry Shortcake, Superbook, which we talked about last Easter, Shirley Temple movies, Reading Rainbow, and Sesame Street, and now there's a guy with his face melting off and maggots coming out of the meat. Of course I had nightmares. Because really, and especially 4 or 5, I really wasn't watching TV at all. Like I was an active kid, and then we would read books, and I might have a half hour of TV a night, but really I wasn't even into it. So I had a huge imagination. Mm-hmm. This was... I'm not kidding. I had nightmares about this for a very long time.
Yes.
But yeah, so Marty, because of that, not coming back. But then we have the big reveal of the big ghost, right? Oh no, wait, first the boss comes.
Yeah, we mentioned the boss comes, and basically he just kind of
giving backstory. And also offers Craig T. Nelson a new house.
Yeah, I'll build you a new house up on that hill next to the other cemetery that's up. And he goes, we'll just move that like the other one. And Craig T. Nelson's like, what? What do you mean we moved to a cemetery?
And also, that's what happens when you miss a lot of work, Steve. Miss a couple weeks of work and claim you have the flu, and the boss will come down and offer you more money.
Are you trying to hold out on me? I can't lose you, buddy. I'll give you a bigger house.
Well, we do find out, this guy, I know, right? This guy has basically been bringing in like 50% of the company's profits.
Yeah.
And now he's not selling houses.
Right.
For them. So we have our medium. I put... She's a little medium with a tiny voice, and that's a pun.
So this is where Zelda Rubinstein comes in.
And Craig T. Nelson makes a joke that I did not care for. He looks and he goes, Martha, what side of the rainbow are we going over today? Because Zelda's very diminutive and almost a little person, and it's a little person joke. The only small nod, and it's like a throwaway line, right? So I liked the fact that they didn't refer to that at all other than that little throwaway line. Because this is like when we see Peter Dinklage in a movie, he's a good actor.
Yeah.
I just want to see a good actor in a role, you know? Martha goes, well, go up to Carol Ann's room. Tangina or whatever. I don't even think they refer to her by name. They're like, go up to Carol Bann's room. It's the heart of the house. And she goes, this house has many hearts. And then walks away creepily and doesn't explain herself at all.
No.
I remember this as a kid that she creeped me out almost as much as the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Just because of her voice being like kind of eerie. But we have all of these TVs set up and recording, and they record basically what looks like a spirit leading a number of other spirits out somewhere.
Yeah, around the house.
Around the house. Yeah. And it might be Carol Ann.
Well, the medium, Zelda, or her name is Tangina.
Yeah.
She explains, like, she can feel all this. And she explains that Carol Ann got pulled into this, like, other dimension where ghosts are. And she's obviously alive still. So she's like, it's like having a beacon in the middle of darkness, right? So all these other ghosts are attracted to her because she's not supposed to be there. And she has, like, this life essence.
And she goes, she gives off an illumination, a light of memory, love, home, and earthly pleasures. What?
Well, wait a second. She's 5, so let's not...
And I get that you mean the earthly pleasures of just being alive, being a child, but it's
like some bubble gum, maybe a nice... How would you like a lollipop, Megan?
Yeah. But at any rate, it's a really interesting premise. It is a little info dumpy, but basically she says Carol Ann is a distraction from the real light. Right. That they can finally they can finally see the light to cross over because of Carol Ann. But then, hold on to yourselves, because there's a dark presence, and we call it the Beast. And later on, I guess in other movies, they call it Mr. Beast, which I find
Kane, I believe, too. He's an old man comes in who plays this bad guy.
Why are we putting a Mr. in front of the Beast?
You know, you want to be formal. Yeah, Megan, I'm not on a first name basis with the Beast, okay?
Well, no, that's
it's Mr. Beast to you.
But at this point,
not Joe Beast.
I put in my notes, damn, so much of this is just people standing around talking. Because it's like action, and then we go back to this long piece where they're just talking and sitting around a table and figuring out what to do and blah, blah, blah.
Megan, it's important you don't rush into action when dealing with the paranormal. You need to have a good plan.
My plan is to grab my bug out bag and my dog.
And leave your daughter trapped in the TV?
No, I take the TV with me. And she's crossed over. I don't know.
I mean, it solves the room situation with 2 kids, right?
That's true. There's like... Martha at first says, tell her to stay away from the light, and Carol Ann's like, I'm afraid of the light, Mommy. And then at other times they tell her to run into the light. It's like, make up your mind.
This is the deal, okay? What is explained by Tangina is that she's like a beacon, right? This other universe, the ghosts go there, and then they're supposed to see, the light, like go to the light, which is for them to cross over, right? To be at peace. But now there's 2 lights. The little girl and the real one, and they're confused.
And also...
So what Tangina's telling the little girl is go to the real light so that the ghosts will go in that. But don't go in it yourself, right? Lead them to where they're supposed to be.
So they have this thing where they send a tennis ball through because stuff is dropping from the ceiling into the living room.
Yeah.
So they think that it's now some kind of a portal between... that the other worldliness is kind of happening in the middle, but one end is in the closet, the other end is in the living room.
Right. As it would be.
Of course, yeah. So they throw the tennis ball one, they throw the second tennis ball, and then they're about to put Tangina on a rope, and JoBeth Williams says, no, let me do it. And Tangina yells, you've never done this before. And JoBeth Williams goes, neither have you. And I was almost half expecting the medium to say, yes, I have. She does.
Or protest, and instead she goes, no, you're right, tie her on. And she's just like, nope, I'm done.
Again, it's a little bit of humor in this like weird situation. And then the dad wants to go in, but she says, who's going to hold the rope?
Yeah, you got to pull us out, basically.
You got to pull us out. So then they say, don't pull the rope until I say to. And then he starts pulling early after the mom's in there, thinking that he'll pull them out. And instead he pulls out the beast, which looks like a tree monster.
Again, not good animation.
Yeah.
Right?
But the mom and the daughter fall through the other side.
Yeah. It's, again, interesting because you have spots here like where the animation and special effects not great, but you had spots like where the guy tore his face off, which was really well done.
Yeah, for the time.
And it's not Spielberg, because Spielberg's doing E.T. at this time, which has great effects.
Yeah.
So is it like the days Tobe was in charge?
I don't know.
He was like, whatever, draw some animation on it.
They ran out of money, maybe?
I don't know.
I don't know. And I'm not a big person for like George Lucas, stop messing around with your films.
Right.
This is a case where I don't think it would take away from the nostalgia of the film to add a better...
To go back and revamp it a little bit?
Just to add like a better tornado and a better smoke hand. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, So
they basically pushes the monster goes back in, and her and the daughter fall through the portal into the living room.
And they're covered with what looks like they're like babies.
Ectoplasm, kind of.
Yeah, but it's supposed to, I think, look like they're babies with like the... Yeah.
Well, everything has. Like the tennis balls came out that way, right?
Yeah. So then Tangina lies to them and says, "This house is clean," and then she leaves.
Yeah, she's like, "Peace out."
Yeah.
That'll be $2,000.
Then we cut to a little bit later, and they're moving.
Yeah.
Now,
good choice.
I would have just left that day, and again, the movers can take care of the stuff.
Tangina said it's clean.
Yeah, well, she doesn't really know what she's talking about. The mom, Dana, goes up to the mom and is like, "You need to color your hair." She's got
apparently
gray
the mom
streaks.
has like gray streak from this, like from being in the other world.
And Carol Ann is unscarred. She doesn't remember anything.
Nope.
Robbie, on the other hand, I think is secretly traumatized from all of it because he remembers
he didn't get to
everything.
forget this stuff.
No, and he also was almost eaten by a tree.
Yeah, and then everyone just forgot it because his sister disappeared.
If I was him, I'd be like, I'm living where there's only like maybe a cactus outside.
Yeah.
So she's dyeing her hair in what can only be described as the most luxurious bathtub.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this too because at this point, now JoBeth Williams, as you said, was maybe, 33 at the time?
Yeah.
And they're almost, in this movie, they're almost putting her up as like the sexy mom.
Yeah.
Because there's a number of places in this movie where she's in like very short shorts with her legs really exposed, or she's in kind of like not super exposing nightgowns, but kind of. And then in this piece, she comes out of dyeing her hair and she's in like a football jersey with no pants, right? Just underwear on. That in the shirt, football jersey is supposed to like be hanging down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's showing a lot of leg and butt. And then she gets picked up and moved around the room, showing her panties and her belly and everything.
And they show her getting undressed to get in the bathtub too.
Yes.
There's very similar scenes in Alien of Sigourney Weaver. That she's supposed to be tough, but and it's a weird choice.
I was like, Tobe, the director.
Tobe was directing.
I was like, Tobe. Toby's like, how can we get JoBeth Williams' skin a little bit? We need to see some
Let's
skin.
have her color her hair.
And he's like, here's what you're gonna wear. And she's like, where's the pants? And he's like, no pants.
So at any rate, the clown attacks Robbie.
Yes.
And the actor was actually hurt during this scene. They had like mechanical arms go around his neck and they tightened them too much.
The funny part is like you said you remembered that scene because you kept going, when's the clown going to attack?
Yeah.
And I remember that. It's one of the most iconic scenes, and I don't recall it being at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, I thought that
it's in like the last 2 minutes.
I actually, in my brain, I had swapped the clown in the tree.
Gotcha.
Because the rest of what happens is all about what's going on outside. The skeleton coffins start coming up out of the earth. They've had an earthquake already, but the ground is like moving again.
Yeah.
And
it's like coffin whack-a-mole.
Yeah. And then the boss happens to be there. Craig T. Nelson sees the house glowing and Steve goes, "No." Nope. Actually says you can get another wife and kids.
Yeah, your second wife will be probably not haunted.
You're not that old.
Yeah.
It's fine. But he's there with the boss and he says, "You SOB, you left the Didn't you? You moved the headstones, but you left the bodies.
The boss is like, what are you talking about? And coffins pop up on the side. He's like, yeah, okay, you got me.
So to me, it would have made way more sense if the tree had been at that point, because it's all like the earth is like rebelling against them, right? But no, the clown is trying to attack him. The mom grabs Robbie's hand. He grabs Carol Ann's hand so that they're pulling together and they're safe. The neighborhood is in complete mayhem, and then the house collapses in on itself.
Yeah, they all get out, and then the house sucks into the portal, and nothing's left.
Yeah, and so the poltergeist is attached to a person. So is the Holiday Inn safe? Because I think it's still with Carol Ann.
Was it attached to the dead bodies under the house, maybe?
I mean, it might have been.
Because those were the ghosts?
We don't know.
But anyway, they don't stay to find out. They get in their car and jet, which is finally the smart thing to do.
Yeah, except that the poltergeist is attached to Carol Ann. It's going to follow him through 2 more movies. and a
we know that's true now.
And a reboot. Yeah, so that's the movie. The house collapses in on itself. They get out. And they basically have, they're looking at starting a new life.
Yes.
And that's it. So you can probably tell a little bit about how we felt, but how did people feel at the time? How was this rated like on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff?
So interestingly enough, I would assume this would be a Halloween movie. It released in June.
Okay.
June 4th, 1982.
So it's like a summer blockbuster.
So it was a summer blockbuster, right?
Well, did they release? I think they did. I think E.T. was at Christmas.
That would make sense.
So they don't want to
keep
have
them apart.
Yeah.
So it released, right? It was a huge commercial success. Okay. It made $76 million, which especially in the early 80s is a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was the highest grossing horror film of the year.
Okay.
And it was like the 8th highest grossing film at all for the whole year.
Okay.
Not just out of all genres. So it really did well. It's been regarded as one of the classic horror films of the last, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, I think people are remembering it right.
It has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 88%.
Okay.
With 72 critics. I mean, that's not bad, right? Mm-hmm. It has a Metacritic score of 79, which is, again, pretty close, right? And that's based on like 20 critics, so it's still pretty good. Generally favorable reviews. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars. He called it an effective thriller, not so much because of the special effects as because Hooper and Spielberg have tried to see the movie's strange events through the eyes of the family members.
Right.
Instead of just standing back and letting special effects overwhelm you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I don't, so.
Maybe we're just looking at it, 40 years later.
Well, but this is part of part of our show, right? We ask, does this hold up? And certainly at the time, like, obviously, I was very scared the first time I watched it. I think the second time I watched it, I was probably 16 or 17, and I found it scary. I did not find it scary now. Now, part of that could be that I know what's coming. I know that there's the clown scene. I know that she gets sucked into the closet. So the anticipation factor isn't there, right?
Yep.
But part of it is that there is a good full on, out of the 2 hours, there's 50 minutes of just people talking and not always about the ghosts.
Yeah.
And
you're not the only one. It wasn't everyone's favorite cup of tea.
Okay.
Ebert gave it 3 stars. Siskel gave it 1.5.
There we go. Good for you, Siskel.
Gene Siskel said that it nailed and beautifully set the setting of getting suburban American life correct.
Yeah. And
that was great. But then he said when it came time for the terror to begin, the whole thing was very silly.
That's interesting. So my issue is that I just thought the terror should have begun earlier on in the movie. I also don't love that we have a double ending. Mm-hmm. I think that that's a horror trope of the monster is dead. Oh no, actually Michael Myers didn't die. We look out the window after we push him out the window and now he's gone. Yeah. And we know he's going to come back. That's in Scream, where they're like, is he dead? And she shoots him 2 more times just to be sure. So I didn't love the double ending, but...
Well, the Washington Post, interestingly enough, also said that it decidedly seemed patchy at times.
Yes.
As if two distinct hands were putting it together at cross purposes.
So unsurprisingly,
which we know was happening.
Yeah. I wish that Steven Spielberg had just done E.T. and then done this movie.
And did this.
And probably he couldn't, because I'm guessing 83 is another Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he probably just unfortunately didn't have the time. But some of it is, I hate to say this because I know he wrote it, but some of it is the script. And it just needed some tightening up. But having said that,
Poltergeist was selected as the New York Times as one of the best 1,000 movies ever made.
Okay.
It also received recognition from the AFI, the American Film Institute, where it's number 84 of the 100 Years of 100 Thrills list. It received Oscar nominations for Best Original Score, Best Sound Effects, and Best Visual Effects, losing them all to Spielberg's E.T.
Yeah.
So, Spielberg had a tough year. He had two movies competing for Oscars.
And then, what really stinks about that is that he didn't win Best Picture or Best Director because it went to Gandhi that year.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is a forgotten movie, and E.T. is kind of an enduring, which we haven't watched E.T. We should have instead of watching this, because it would have been better and more enjoyable. So
what were your thoughts?
So my highlights are, I do think that the cast was good. I think that, unfortunately, Dominique Dunn is a little underplayed. I think they could have given her a bigger part. I think that she could have been like a skeptical older sister.
Yeah.
And instead they kind of kept writing her off and sending her off with friends and things, which I didn't really understand. But I think she did well. I think the kids, seemed like normal kids, right? I think that JoBeth Williams, Craig T. Nelson, Zelda Rubinstein, who played Tangina, I think everybody was cast really well.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with the acting.
But I think the acting was great. I just think it could have been tightened up. I think some of the special effects were not there. But yeah, in terms of does it hold up? For me, it didn't. Having said that, if I showed this to somebody where it was their first viewing, do you think that they would be scared by this movie? Do you think that they would find it slow and boring? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, this leads into my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
We ask ourselves on this program, right? Does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood? Mm-hmm. This is a ruiner.
Yeah.
Right? Because I always had this idea of Poltergeist. Like when you said, hey, what's a good Halloween movie? I said, well, I don't want... Last year we did a kids' Halloween thing.
Right.
So this year I want something scary and adult. Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. And now I'm like, Like it's not what I all remembered. And a matter of fact, like if somebody would come up to me today and say, hey, Steve, what... I want a movie that's going to scare the pants off me. Like, I want to be in my house tonight, turn off the lights, and I'm bringing my girlfriend over or whatever, and I want to be scared. Give me 3 movies. This doesn't make the list.
But I would say this too, Steve, that there are some other ones. Okay, I was working at camp when Blair Witch Project came out, and we all went to see it, and then the next day we had to take kids for an overnight in the woods, and that movie did scare the pants off of me. If I were to watch that now, it would be really dull, and I'd be like, okay, we don't see anything, and at the end they stand in a corner. Yeah. So I do think it is partially, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to somebody.
It's not the acting, but the effects are not great.
No.
As far as holding up wise. Tone's weird.
The tone is weird, and here's why. They're trying to build tension, which is done in many movies today better, okay? You can build tension without having... They have nothing, and then a bunch of stuff. And you're supposed to, feel tension, how come nothing's happened yet? But in a better, tighter script, you have more than just the bird dying.
Yes.
Right? Maybe you have a couple scenes where just Carol Ann and Robbie see the chairs moving. And they tell Dana, and she's like, whatever, kids are playing games again. Okay? Little things like that. Or have a different scene with Carol Ann and the TV people where she's not just saying, oh, hello, I'm 5. There are 5 of us living here. Have that be a little creepier. And then you wonder, is she mentally ill or is she talking? And instead, it's like nothing or too much.
Right.
And I think that's the tone.
So what's your rating? Out of 10 haunted houses, what do you give Poltergeist?
I don't know. Like, I guess when I think of a report card, we talked about this last time, Lois and Clark was like a solid A. This is more like a D. You passed the class, but it's not going to transfer.
Right.
Like, that's kind of, as a teacher, that's kind of...
Yeah.
So I think maybe a 5.
I'm going with a 5, dog, but that's
Why are you calling me dog? I don't like that.
I'm going with 5 is the highest I can give it.
Okay.
Like, it's not the classic I remember. Again, the actors were probably the best part of this, and some of the humor, but the tone was messy. And to be honest, we've talked about this before too. Like, if I wanted, say we had teenage kids, and they decided they were in a horror phase, and we're like, okay, let's pick 10 movies to watch this week, and they're horror movies. This would not make my list.
No, I'd be going like Exorcist, maybe a slasher, Friday the 13th.
Right.
Maybe. I'm not...
This is not going to make the list.
No, it's not. You're looking at like Halloween. You're looking at... Yeah.
And as you said, some of it is because of time and age, but that's not always the case. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's movies like the original Omen still is scary.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that movie
and it was done way before this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's not always time that does that. But
no, you can watch, like, listen, I'll tell you that if you watch like some of the black and whites, they're like, I showed my class, we read the book Rebecca, and then I showed them the movie Rebecca. That movie is creepy in parts. It's a Hitchcock film. It's very like sinister, and you can have a movie be scary. It's just this one doesn't. It doesn't hold up as much. So five haunted houses out of 10.
Out of 10, not great. But we did end up having a pretty decent. What was our serial rank?
Our cereal was 4 out of 5.
So we ended up pretty good there.
And then I drank my entire water bottle throughout this podcast because it was saltier than I thought.
Okay.
And I've been very, very thirsty. So this brings us to my favorite section.
The infamous.
What is Steve to watch? Steve, I love doing this so much.
This brings you too much joy.
It brings me so much joy. So our Remy Awards for Reminiscence.
Yes.
Our Remy Awards had Darkwing Duck as a winner.
Yep.
For cartoon show.
Yep. Because
Stephen and Timothy picked and Megan did not. And also it kind of keeps with our superhero theme that we had going a little bit.
Yes.
And then after that, hopefully we might do some Thanksgiving stuff.
Yeah, we'll see what comes around the bend.
But for Darkwing Duck, all of the titles are puns.
Okay, fun.
On movie names.
Okay.
And other, like band names and things like that.
Okay.
So I chose Jurassic Jumble because it looks like it might have to do with dinosaurs, and I thought that'd be fun.
Okay.
I don't remember anything about the show. So here are your choices. Mine's from season 1. Okay,
yep.
So these are all from season 2. Episode 6, Clash Reunion. Instead of class.
Okay, got it.
Megavolt plans to destroy the high school reunion. Not a high school reunion.
Okay.
This is my favorite pun, and I don't. Mutiny. I can't even read it. It's a pun on Mutiny on the Bounty.
Okay.
But it's like mutancy on the Bounty.
Okay.
Gosselin discovers Swellen Swine is not who she seems. I don't know who any of these people are. Episode 8, Paint Misbehaving.
Okay.
Splatter Phoenix brings paintings to life. Or episode 11, Fraudcast News. TV reporter Bianca Beakley begins a new crime wave.
Well, I know this is your favorite day ever because you love puns.
I love puns.
Let's go with Paint Misbehaving.
Okay. Yeah, we had another one where paintings came to life or something.
I don't know. We'll see.
My Little Pony, I think.
Possibly, yeah.
Where
the stuff in the house.
The stuff in the house came to life. So Paint Misbehaving. Season 2, Episode 8. And mine is going to be the Jurassic Jumble, which is Season 1, Episode 23.
Excellent.
So that's what's coming up. And I don't know if we'll have Gremlins. We're going to try. So hopefully we'll have that. And stay tuned. If you like the show, please be sure to subscribe. We have also, if you can leave us a review, that would really help. We are trying to be more consistent and get stuff out for you guys. We had a lot of really nice messages when we were gone. People being like, are you guys doing okay?
We are.
Yeah, but we're going strong. We're doing amazing. And we're really glad to be bringing these back to you guys and having fun with it. So hopefully it'll be a better show for us to enjoy. But even if you don't love Poltergeist as we didn't, hopefully you had fun with us today on the show. Thanks, everybody. Have a happy Halloween.
Bye-bye.
Bye.